Hi everyone, meet me again with Ilham. The plot of this film is entitled The Informer, 2019. Let's watch it in this video. In this story, a man named Pete Koslaw is seen. He is an ex-convict who was recruited as a spy by the FBI and assigned to be an informant for a big drug dealer. He seemed to be working on something and then slipped the item into his clothes. Not long after, a call from the FBI came into his phone, informing him that their target would arrive carrying 6 kilograms of fentanyl. Not long after, it was the turn of another cell phone to get a call, but this time the call came from his gangster friend named Stazek. The two of them began to talk about the arrival of their boss, including the illegal goods that would be smuggled. Koslaw is also described as a responsible husband and father because he, who knew the dangers of this assignment, immediately asked his wife and children to take shelter elsewhere instead of going on vacation. Koslaw also did not forget to leave the key with his wife named Sophia, while asking her not to open the door to anyone if he did not return from this mission. At the same time, an FBI agent named Wilcox was seen giving directions to other officers regarding the ambush that would be carried out on their target. The FBI agent who had previously contacted Koslaw also explained the former convict's contribution to this ambush. Wilcox emphasized that because of the gas, all officers did not need to arrest or hurt him, except to wait for the signal of instruction from Koslaw to start his action later. Well, the next day, Koslaw carried out his action by meeting Stazek under the supervision of Wilcox and his troops. However, without him knowing, it turned out that Stazek had invited Koslaw to meet the buyer. Suddenly, he was confused because that was not part of his plan yesterday. The same thing happened to Wilcox, who now had to follow the movement pattern of his target. Upon arriving at the transaction location, Koslaw, who played his role very well, found something odd about his prospective buyer this time. The reason was, the man looked awkward and did not look like an addict or other criminal at all. Not only that, Kinnaman was also really felt by Koslaw when he found out the lie of the prospective buyer who claimed to have been imprisoned together in Bell Hill. As a result, Koslaw believed that the man in front of him was a police officer who might be on duty but did not know who Koslaw really was. Koslaw slowly tried to warn the police to leave the place because, in any case, the police's life could be threatened. However, the undercover policeman showed a surprising response by taking out a gun as if he wanted to scare Koslaw. Instead of successfully escaping and saving himself, or catching Koslaw's gang, the policeman fell after Stazek's shot hit his body. Finding this action, Koslaw was annoyed because the initial scenario that he had prepared with Wilcox had fallen apart. He then left the place on the grounds that he wanted to smoke, which was actually a code from Koslaw, so that Wilcox and his unit could immediately secure the place. However, something unexpected happened, because it turned out that Wilcox actually made his own decision by leaving the place and withdrawing his troops so as not to ambush the place. After cleaning up the police corps, Koslaw and his gang now arrive at the headquarters of the drug lord known as Research Climax. Savagely, Climax beats Stazek because he is considered to have threatened his business following the shooting of the police. Unlike Koslaw, he was ordered by Climax to surrender to the police, because according to him, in this way, the shooting case will not be swept under the rug by the police, which could disrupt his business. Climax even guarantees that Koslaw's prison term will not last long, because he has also prepared a team of lawyers to shorten his prison term. But it turns out that the plan is not only to cover up the shooting case, the drug lord also intends to make Koslaw a supplier of illegal goods in the prison. Unfortunately, Climax has also detained Koslaw's wife and children, which makes his request even more irresistible to the former convict. On the banks of the river, the former police officer known as Daniel Gomez was finally found by other police officers. Among them is Edward Grentz, who was an officer in the Criminal Organization Division and also the superior of the late Daniel and his unit in a different place. Cole Sewell is seen meeting with Wilcox and begins to ask by the FBI agent when Daniel was shot. However, instead of getting an explanation, Koslow seemed to be blamed for letting a police officer die in the incident. Not only that, his confession about the climax plan that wanted to put him in prison actually made him fall deeper into this mission, because Wilcox asked Koslow to continue to fulfill the climax wishes so that later he could get evidence of the circulation of illegal goods there. Hearing this statement clearly made Koslow upset. However, he himself could not do much because Wilcox's superiors even threatened him with all kinds of lawsuits that seemed to really get Koslow as Daniel's killer. As if having no other choice, Koslow can now only follow the climax move to go to prison while acting as an informant for the FBI. However, without anyone knowing, it turned out that Koslow had anticipated all the events that he experienced. This can be seen from his conversations with the FBI, which he always recorded on cassette tape. Moving on to Edward, he who still had not accepted the death of his subordinates, began to look for various information about the figure he suspected of being Daniel's killer. He even suspected Koslow as the person behind the death of his men. However, from here it began to be revealed that Koslow was actually a former military member. At the same time, he also became an informant for the FBI. Although Edward was initially doubtful, he seemed very curious about Koslow, who he still suspected was behind the big role of the climax on a different night. The celebration before Koslow was put in prison was carried out, and it appeared that Climax came with his wife to have dinner with Koslow and Sophia. There was nothing strange in the meeting that night, but what was interesting was that Edward appeared to have been stalking Koslow's house long before Climax arrived there. Not only was he suspicious of the arrival of the drug lord, but Edward was also confused when the next day he found Koslow being arrested by the police in his yard. As if not wanting to be bullied by his curiosity, Edward finally went to Wilcox at the FBI office. Well, there Edward immediately asked about the FBI's involvement in Koslow's parole, because according to him, the man should still be serving a 20-year sentence. But strangely, Koslow, who had only served a 4-year sentence, had been declared parole. That was what raised suspicion in Redward, especially since he also found CCTV footage showing Koslow being around the location where Daniel died, including the woman in the car he believed was Wilcox. As if feeling cornered, Wilcox and his superiors could only remain silent under the threat of Edward, who was ready to fight the FBI if his suspicions were proven true. In prison, Koo was placed in a large cell with other prisoners. It seemed that he was welcomed by the prisoners there because they knew that Ko was the one who was ordered by Climax. He was even given money by other prisoners who were also the drug lord's subordinates. Meanwhile, in another place, Sophia was seen putting a package of illegal goods into a pigeon carcass, which was then transported by a drone and dropped right on the roof of the prison area. It turned out that this was a strategy carried out by the Climax in running a business of distributing illegal goods in prison, because the next day Koslow, who was assigned to the cleaning department, managed to find the bird carcass and immediately put it in a trash bag. Turning to Edward, who continued his investigation, he now approached Sophia's shop and immediately asked her about the case that had befallen the empty one. But unfortunately, Sophia was still not very open. She even kicked Redward out of the place, as if not wanting anything worse to happen to his family. Getting a rejection from the woman, Edward then left his business card hoping that Sophia could contact him if something happened to the woman. Edward also said that he would thoroughly investigate the case that worshipped Koslow and could even fight for his freedom if Sofia was willing to help him return to Koslaw. He who was starting to be able to distribute illegal goods in prison was now approached by one of the prisoners from another gang known as Furman. It turned out that the prisoner only wanted to connect Koslaw with Edward via a radio call. From here, Edward openly said that soon there would be another gang in prison who would kill Koslaw for giving any information about Daniel's death. The words in verse 1 did not seem to be just a bluff, because not long after that, Koslaw was taken to one of the rooms, and immediately, including one of them, was the male prison warden, even hung on a rope to make a ploy, as if Koslaw's death was his own action. But not long after, Koslaw finally admitted that he was just an informant and worked to dig up all information about the climax. Hearing this confession, a group of black prisoners then untied the rope around Koslaw's neck, and it was revealed that they were the drug lord's business rivals. Meanwhile, at the FBI office, Wilkos and his superior named Kate Montgomery were now panicked because it turned out that Edward really did a reckless act by coming directly to Bell Hill Prison, which was an empty place to be punished. Not only that, Edward was also known to have asked for data about Kosau's involvement as an informant for the FBI. However, from here it began to be revealed that Montgomery and Wilkos involved Kosau as an informant secretly without the knowledge of the FBI headquarters. The actions of the two FBI agents were clearly against the regulations there and could threaten their careers. But unfortunately, Montgomery instead told Wilcox to eliminate Koslaw. Hearing the order, Wilcox clearly rejected it outright because Koslaw had contributed a lot to their actions so far. Moreover, the former military man also had a family that could not be abandoned just like that. As if not wanting to argue with his subordinates, Montgomery instead said that Kareem Wilkos seemed very threatened and could even end up in prison if he did not immediately finish off Koslaw, because according to him, there were only the names Wilkos and Koslaw in their documents. Back to Koslaw, who had pocketed the names of people involved in the climax business in prison, finally told Wilcox according to the initial orders given to him by the FBI, but suspicion was immediately felt by Koslaw because Wilcox, who should have been happy with the news, was just silent and did not give a single word of response. Solo found a tone that was not right with the FBI. Koslaw immediately contacted Sofia and asked her to immediately save herself and their child because he felt the FBI had betrayed him. Koslaw also asked Sofia to use the key he had given her earlier, which turned out to be the key to open the box containing all the recordings of Koslaw's conversations with the FBI so far. Unfortunately, Sofia, who was opening the box, was approached by Wilkos, who suddenly came to his place. The FBI agent also immediately took all the tapes and played the area in the car. Who knows what Wilkes was thinking? He seemed very confused and hesitant when he found the recording results that Koslaw had kept without his knowledge. At the same time, Climax, who had found out Koslaw's real guys, finally ordered his men in prison to finish off Koslaw. But luckily for Koslaw, he had the chance to get the attack from one prisoner, managed to paralyze him, and he even managed to create chaos by taking a warden hostage. Meanwhile, Stasig and other Climax men are now seen coming to Sofia. Their arrival aims to eliminate Koslaw's wife and children by burning down the house, but fortunately the action was thwarted by Edward, who suddenly came and shot dead the gang of Climax men there, even though he himself was also shot in the leg. Returning to Koslaw, he who had been surrounded cleverly exchanged his clothes with the uniform of the warden he had taken hostage earlier to trick a number of officers who were going to arrest him. Through his strategy, the sniper on guard finally fired his shot at the warden who was wearing a prisoner's uniform. The shot also indirectly triggered an explosion in the gas cylinder that had been installed empty earlier. As a result, a large explosion occurred right in the room where Kahlo was. Luckily for Kozlov, he who had taken shelter from the explosion earlier finally managed to survive after some treatment in the ambulance. Interestingly, he who was previously thought to be unable to survive the incident was actually found to be alive. And that's what made Wilkos take the initiative to free Kozlov by equipping him with a gun as if the Dnipro had been threatened by the man. On a tour ship, Wilkos, who met Montgomery, was again searched for by his superior's order, who told him to immediately find and finish off Kozlov. But this time, Wilcox did not hesitate to refuse it. He even seemed to have collaborated with Edward, because not long after a number of officers came and immediately arrested Montgomery. At the end of the film, Sophia and her child are seen in a city park, also seen Kozlov from a distance, but unfortunately, he could not get closer to his family following the presence of a number of FBI agents who followed every activity of Sophia and her child. Not long after that, Edward secretly approached Kozlov and gave him a passport and a number of documents that would take the military eye to hide elsewhere. Edward also said that Wilkos had promised to reunite Kozlov with his family for at least the next few months or after the investigation into the corruption case in prison was completed. And this story ends. Okay, see you in another video.